Very pleased to welcome today Azadeh Khatibi. I think I got that right. She's going to hold my hand to the fire on that one. She, amongst other things, has an MPH. She's an MD. She's an ophthalmologist. She's a performer as well. And she has been fighting against physician censorship and fighting for medical freedom and physician autonomy. I saw some of her videos on, I think it was on X, and I thought, I need to speak to my peer here. This is somebody who is doing God's work, and she's a lot younger than I am, so I'm very interested in her perspective on how this has affected her career and her peer's career, and we will get right to it after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for Christ's sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue. And we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. So, in addition to being a physician, Dr. Khatibi is a filmmaker and an actress. She actually acted and helped produce a feature called Window Horses with Sandra Oh, a shortlist for Academy Award nomination. She's done a lot of work, but she's an ophthalmologist. She's a physician from UCSF, which, those of you who don't know, is one of the top medical schools in the country. She has a master's in public health, which fascinates me because the public health world seems to have lost its mind, and so we should be able to get a good perspective from her. And most recently, she's become an advocate, vocal advocate for medical freedom. She particularly has been active against the state of California, which has been egregiously intruding into the physician-patient relationship. She sued the state of California and the medical board in 2 lawsuits regarding First Amendment rights, violations of physicians, and she was successful in getting the legislature and the government to repeal AB 2098, a law they had passed. And we are currently waiting a ruling on that. She's going to join us now. Welcome, Dr. Khatibi.
Dr. Drew, I'm super excited to be here. I'm super honored. Thanks so much for having me. I used to listen to you as an adolescent every single night on Loveline. So it's like surreal and super cool.
Full circle moment. Were you down here in Southern California or Northern California? Where were you?
Oh, yeah, I'm a Valley girl. So I grew up here and LA girl.
It's weird. Before we went on the air here, first of all, as I'm going on the air, Adam Carolla called me. That's him up there at the top of the banner. And I just saw Kevin Ryder from Kevin and Bean has been reinstated on K-Rock as of this morning or something.
Wow,
it's very weird.
Everything's
going, and now Dr. Khatibi is here with me. So see, it's all meant to be.
We actually had something else in common too. We have something else in common is that you and I have both been on 20 years apart. We've both been on Wheel of Fortune.
Oh my God, that's too weird. That is too crazy because I actually hid that for years. I was sort of
Because he
ashamed of it.
lost.
Well, I lost, and I seem so dumb. A friend of mine
It's
who's
okay.
yeah, it is, but I just felt dumb afterwards. I had a great time and it was good, and it wasn't until I was on one of my appearances on the Ellen show. The producer dug it up and played it. And I was like,
I saw
oh
the
my
clip.
God, I couldn't believe it. And she goes, how does it feel? And I said, you know what? Face your fears, everybody. It's not as bad as you expect. So,
Absolutely.
So when it actually came through, I thought, all right, it's not so bad. It's just a little bit embarrassing.
No, it's fun. You went for it. I love it. You went for it.
I
You,
did.
made
That
it happen.
damn wheel.
Why not?
That damn wheel turned against me, and the little woman from Kansas City next to me cleaned up. So there you go. You forget about the wheel. You practice for the hangman, the game going in there, and you forget the wheel can just go bad. It's just
It does. I went bankrupt once. It happens. It's just life, the ups and downs of life. You just do your best.
Maybe it's my recollection, but my recollection was I missed a letter, then lose a turn, then bankrupt. Oh God, that's terrible. I mean, now I see why I was embarrassed again.
I love that. That's very 80s doctor look.
1984.
You got some great Sunny Delight coupons. Though.
Yes, I got enough Sunny Delight to fill my apartment.
And give it to me. We
I got
just
a trip.
started dating.
I got some cash and a trip to Chicago. So even though I didn't win,
Well, that's not bad. It's better than I did. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
But so let's get down to business here. So
Right.
what
Serious
happened
stuff.
here? What happened to you? First of all, I have I want to get a kind of a setup here, because one of the things I noticed that was confusing to me was how many young physicians were getting MPHs, and I couldn't understand why they were doing that. It made no sense to me. And then now we find ourselves in the middle of COVID, where public health goes sideways. So why did you get an MPH? And then what do you think about your public health peers and their behavior during COVID?
Well, I mean, I got an MPH because I went to medical school and I realized, I'm learning about individual health, but I really want to learn about, just always been a very curious, knowledge-seeking person. So I said, okay, well, I want to learn about health from a public perspective. How do we actually shift change instead of like dealing with a heart attack here? Like, how do we prevent heart attacks, like on a population scale? So that was interesting to me. I was also in a 5-year program that only accepted 12 people a year at that point, the joint medical program between UC Berkeley, UCSF. And so I was like, okay, I'm here for 5 years. Might as well learn more. And so I got my MPH. I was also getting a master's at that time too. So I got 3 degrees and had a baby in like 6 years. It was a lot.
Oh my God, that is a lot.
I did it, and I'm so grateful now because of having that background of all those degrees really helped me analyze things, I think, in a way that maybe some of my peers didn't. As for why people are getting multiple degrees now, part of me wishes for the good old Donna Reed days where you just, got your MD and then you established yourself in your practice and you became part of the community and you saw patients. But I think now, like, it's people get their JDs, people get their MBAs. Like a lot of physicians get their MBAs because they saw the corporatization of medicine. They wanted to understand it better and to take leadership in those roles. For me, the MPH seemed like a natural thing to do. It's an intuitive thing, and I love knowledge, so it just made sense. And it was convenient to get to.
What about public health? It felt to me like public health during COVID had gone completely out of its mind.
Oh yeah,
and certainly and it certainly become draconian, totalitarian. I could use a lot of words to describe the behavior and no contemplation of the fundamental task of medicine, which is to assess the risk reward of every decision and every intervention we take. And we have Francis Collins on the record saying, oh no, we didn't pay any attention to what might happen as a result of what we were doing. We just had to stop this thing. Great. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I heard him on the Derate the Hate podcast with Wilkerson, who you've had on your show. He's a friend of mine. And his interview of Francis Collins was like, well, we were just so in the thick of it that we didn't have time to ask our physician colleagues on the outside what their perspectives were. We just wanted to look at what was in front of us and take care of it. And, he had time to make a mediocre song music video during COVID,
Exactly.
but he didn't have time to like.
Did you teach?
Organize.
Did you
He didn't have
teach
time to-
after your ophthalmology training? Did you teach at all, or do you still teach?
So I have not been teaching recently. After you're participating in CME after medical school, so you're actively teaching because you're a doctor at that point. And then after I finished training my residency and fellowship as a retina physician, I was still teaching. And then with these new laws, especially like it's that just keep coming on the books. Like I want to be
there.
able.
We're going to get there. Hold on. We're going to get there. But the point I want to make is the one thing that I would excoriate residents and medical students for is if I asked them for their reasoning in a particular intervention, if they ever said to me I had to do something and couldn't tell me what the expectation of outcome versus risk was, I would excoriate them. That is the most unacceptable thing somebody with an MD after their name can ever say. And there was Francis Collins saying it as though it was an acceptable way to behave. It's disgusting to me. It's the opposite of what our charge is. Do no harm is numero uno. And if you don't contemplate the risk of what you're doing, everything you do has risk. And we have to contemplate it at all times. And the fact that he did not, I find totally unacceptable.
Yeah, and and I think that part of it is like this group think that happens. Everybody shows up at the meeting, probably in DC, and they were all like, there's the group dynamics that happen. Who's the leader? Who are the followers? Like all these things. I would have loved to be a fly on that wall to find out like how their neuropsychological profiles and personalities led them to become followers versus leaders, and to be inhibited to point things out. Or there's also like tribalism that happens, right? This tribalism of, this part of the media is against us, so we must be right? Because I don't agree with them on other stuff. So the conservatives are against me, and so I must, and since I don't like conservative media, I must be on the right path. And there's also something I think deeper too in terms of reactivity. One of the things I've really worked on myself is like, in my mindfulness practice especially, is to reduce the reactivity and instead have a responsiveness and an open-mindedness about things, which I generally tend to be an open person. But like, I remember, when I was listening to you on K-Rock all those years ago, I thought all doctors, I looked up to you because I thought, all doctors are open, and they're open-minded, and they're humble, and they're wise, and they're, and the open-mindedness and like being able to say you're wrong. But then I went to med school and realized a lot of people aren't like that, even in the medical field. So the risk-benefit analysis that you talk about, just to bring it back to the public health thing that you talked about, I was so frustrated and then flabbergasted and then like just completely like overwhelmed by the fact that the people in public health were not looking at following the basic public health principles that I've been taught in public health school. Basic stuff.
Right. That's right.
What is going on? What is going on with the people? What do the people want? You don't just push an intervention on people. And this was a public health ethics thing that we learned in medical school, an issue of coming in and just pushing what you think is best on the populace is not the right thing to do. You have to understand their understanding, their culture, their desires, and incorporate that into a positive public health plan. That's number one. And then ethics, right? It's not just a Machiavellian ends justify the means, right? That's like the opposite of what we learned in public health school. The means that through which you achieved your end is very important. It has to be ethical. It has to take into account what's going on the ground and what the people's desires are and what their cultural understandings are. And so that wasn't being considered at all. And the mandates, with the vaccinations that came, there was no public health uproar about, hey, what about the Geneva Convention? How about all these documents that we have that in times of emergencies, right? When things are like chill and no problem and there's no pandemic, although we can discuss what the definition of pandemic and how that changed over time and how that was used incorrectly. But like, if there's an emergency going on, that's the time when these documents, these ethics and medical ethics documents and agreements that you guys have throughout the years and decades of experience, especially people in World War II who saw the horrors of what happened, especially us in California, which were the leaders of the eugenics movement that fed the Holocaust. When we've gone through this stuff, and then we have these rules, like don't do this to people, don't mandate biological interventions that they don't want on them. If you just forget about that, it's just the opposite of what public health ethics should be. So, and then I thought to myself, another thing was like, oh my gosh, why aren't they talking about and about like the importance of diet and exercise and sleep? This could have been this could have been fresh air, sunshine, like the basic doctoring things that now we're realizing the reasons they said fresh air and sunshine is like an important thing. Why aren't they talking about this stuff? Because they were so myopically focused. And that lack of open-mindedness, that myopic focus prevents you from seeing everything else. And this dependence also on medical intervention in the form of a pharmaceutical, as opposed to all the other things that actually create a human thriving, it was hugely to our detriment. And it really was sad the way it played out. I'm really happy that there were some doctors who stood up. I think there were a lot who were just scared and didn't stand up. After I started speaking out, my friends, who come from many different parts of the political spectrum, who are doctors, were like, oh, I really admire you. It's so great that you're speaking up, but I can't speak up because I'm hired by this organization. Even the private practice ones were scared. Oh, don't say anything. One of them told another friend of mine at a dinner party, he said, don't ever sign an exemption. It's just like saving your skin as opposed to actually following the ethics of what a doctor should do.
Yeah, and then they went into full psyop mode. Guys like Aaron Khariati lost their job. The people reminding literally the medical ethicist who was reminding his institution of exactly what you're talking about. Their response was to fire him. Genius, I'm telling you, genius. But there's embedded in what you were just saying was you were tilting at something very interesting. And we're going to get to the California law stuff. We got a lot to talk about. But there's two things that you said that was of a sort of a tone or a sort of a theme in what you just mentioned. And I want to pull them forward. One was that life is going to be better with a pharmaceutical agent. You called it a medical intervention, and let's just call it a medical intervention. That it can only make drugs. Because I was raised by an old family practitioner who told me meds are dangerous. Only when it's worth the risk do you think about it. I didn't take an antibiotic until I was 15. My dad was a doctor. And so medicines are dangerous in all situations unless it's worth the risk. If not taking it is more dangerous, then you take it. But this was not the case for a 19-year-old male or a 24-year-old male. The vaccines were more dangerous, and the illness was not dangerous, so not worth it. So the issue A is, one, everything's going to be solved by a medical intervention. Let's use your terminology, because as soon as you say pharmaceutical, it gets sort of front-loaded as pharma. But let's just say medical intervention, number one. Number two, on the back of that is some weird notion that human thriving is predicated on safety. Safe, gotta be safe. Can't go to the Palisades till it's safe. Can't go to Arcadia, Altadena till it's safe. And that's insane. Life is not safe. Being biological is not safe. The risk of doing the things that were necessary to thrive necessitate risk. And risk requires being unsafe once in a while. So pick up on both of those themes, if you would.
Well, let's talk about and then you can remind me what the first thing is. Oh, the pharmaceutical, the concept of a drug.
Pharmaceuticals, everything's going to be solved by a medical intervention, and everything has to be safe. Both
right.
wrong.
I mean, the word safe, we've lost the concept of what the word safe is anyway. There is no such thing as safe, right? I think, again, reactivity in my mindfulness training was something like, we have to reduce reactivity and promote centeredness, which really, the reactivity really fed a lot of people's dysregulated behavior during COVID and them feeding
You're choosing your words very carefully, I'm noticing, and you may want to fill in. I know the code you're using. I get it, but I'm not sure. But you may need to flush some of that out.
Well, I mean, reactivity of politicians, reactivity of the populace when they listen to the news and then they're like, oh my God, and they feed into it. The reactivity of doctors who try to save their skin instead of being centered, calm, wise, and then responding appropriately in the given moment. That's kind of what I mean by reactivity that leads to like dysregulation within society and also dysregulation within the self. But for me, coming in medicine, this is very basic, like medicine 101 that you learn. Okay, go get consent from the patient for this procedure. So you go in as, your med student with your intern, for example, and then you tell the patient, okay, we're going to do this procedure on you. It has risks, benefits, and there's alternatives. And so you document risks, benefits, alternatives discussed with the patient. You never go to the patient and say, this is safe, you should do it. Like, you're taught that is actually unethical to do. It is wrong to do, and you're lying to the patient. However, somehow, during the COVID time, the word safe was like this wonderful thing. Vaccines are safe and effective, safe and effective, safe. And I was making the argument, especially on my physician Facebook groups, like, why are you guys using the word safe? Like, is the world upside down? Nothing is ever safe. There's always risk. And I never told a patient when when you're during the consent procedure, whenever they ask me, like, is this safe? I would say, nothing is safe. There's always a risk. Yeah. In your case, right. You're a 20-year-old, 25-year-old male engineer who's very conscientious, and you can't see from this because of this membrane on your retina, and you're really upset about it and you can't do your work. I would say the risks are outweighed by the benefits of this procedure of getting a membrane peel. Yeah. However, if the same lady, if another patient came to me who was 75 years old and said, yeah, I know I have this membrane, maybe it's a little bit warped, but I just watch TV, I don't really do much reading, it really doesn't bother me. It's like, no, we're not going to do that because the risk of the procedure outweigh the benefit to you. So it's going to be case by case basis. That was thrown out the window during COVID. I don't know why. And so I had to find myself discussing like basics of medicine. The word safe should not be used when discussing medication. No medication or any intervention is safe. Walking down the street is not safe. Being in this physical body and having this physical experience on this earth has risk. And sometimes terrible things happen, even if you've tried to mitigate the risk. And you just have to understand that there's going to be a risk. So there's no such thing as safe. We should just get rid of that word in medicine.
Yeah, I agree. I tell people, you walk across the threshold of my office and there's all sorts of risk. Just risking falling down in my office, but also any interaction with the medical system, we have a propensity to do harm. And we use things that are potentially dangerous all the time. And that's just what we do. So one quick question.
Yeah. Can I just say one more thing? As far as the drugs, I'm absolutely 100% with you that we need to minimize use of interventions, pharmaceutical interventions. It's gotten to this crazy. It's crazy. We live in an insane system where 40 and 50-year-old women, 25% of them are on antidepressants, right? You go to the office, you're like a 50-year-old woman, I don't feel good. Here's an antidepressant. There's no counseling. There's maybe they'll refer you to a therapist. And they're not looking at all the other things that are happening. Are you living a purpose-driven life? Your children have left the home. How does that make you feel? What other things are you doing with your day now? Have you considered volunteering? What makes you happy? How's your activity level? Are you getting movement? Are you getting sunlight? What's your nutrition like? 75% of the country is deficient in magnesium, right? We're taking it away from our bones. Like, the basics have been completely ignored, and we're just throwing drugs at people, which is just upside down.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it's not, I don't want to lay it all at the feet of our peers, because the patients play a role in it too. They demand things. You got to give me something. And we cave because we're in a hurry. We're doing our thing, whatever. And then you add to that patient satisfaction surveys. People don't know about that. If the patient doesn't get what he or she wants, they shit on the doctor, and that doctor easily could lose their job easily.
Yeah, that's another thing that's been, it was like, used to be, and you know this better than me because you saw the before of like how pain became another
fifth vital sign.
Right.
Fifth vital sign. Don't even go there.
Everybody had to make everybody's pain zero, or else, if you didn't make their pain zero, it became bad. So then everybody was getting over medicated. Now with these surveys, you want to get a good survey result. So you're just going to appease the patient. And it's just terrible. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So before we go to break, give us a sketch on how you got involved in the California circumstance, and you started really speaking up for medical freedom. What was the evolution there? And then we'll get into the weeds of it. People are criticizing how are you going to get into the weeds. We're going to get into the thicket of it after the break. But tell us, sketch it for us what happened.
I was initially super overwhelmed, in shock, couldn't believe it. And I started following the public health training and medical training I got. And I was like, what I'm hearing on the news, and it really, COVID woke me up to how much the news was teaching me things that, or was trying to tell me things and indoctrinating me in things that were not reality. And as I awoke, I decided to work on myself, strengthen myself, and then I started speaking out. California made these terrible laws, one after another, or bills. And then I started advocating. And as I grew more strong in my voice, as I grew more strong in my confidence and took steps, I started speaking out more and more and got involved in fighting some of these censorship laws against doctors. And they keep writing them, so we have to keep fighting them.
So which one was the first one up?
So the one I'm currently fighting right now was actually written before the first one up, but the first one up was AB 2098, which was a law that was made authored by members of the vaccine working group, especially Evan Lowe was the bill's primary author. And so these people kind of wrote a slew of bills during the COVID times in California as a reaction, right? Not thinking, as a reactionary. And one response, and we have to control doctors was one of them, because doctors are spreading misinformation. And so that was what they were saying, and disinformation. They're saying that there's, nanobots in the vaccines, and we have to get doctors who say there's nanobots in the vaccines. I was like, what doctor is saying there's nanobots in the vaccines?
Right.
Don't we have laws on? And we have laws on the books already that prevent. That can show that legal action can be taken against doctors by the state if they say disinformation. And so they put out a law, AB 2098 was the bill, and Governor Gavin Newsom ended up signing it, and the law said that any doctor who engages in disinformation or misinformation can get their license taken away or investigated. And the disinformation I agree with. Disinformation is like a doctor knowingly spreading false information. That's unethical, it's wrong, absolutely. But their definition of misinformation was really frightening. They defined as misinformation as information that's contrary to, that's against consensus, contrary to standard of care. So this word consensus loomed. I'm like, what's the consensus? Is it formal consensus? Is it informal consensus? Who is deciding the consensus? Why?
Right.
Why are we saying that? What's consensus? So everybody's going to chill their speech. The legal term is called chilling your speech, not speak, which was already happening among physicians. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is just going to compound the issue. And we saw that it did compound the issue. And so as I spoke out against it, I met with my representative, my state senator, Sidney Kamlager's office, who, by the way, was the author of the second bill or the second law that I'm fighting now. She's now gone on to Congress. I don't know what she's doing. I guess she and I have some celestial karma that we're figuring out, or at least I'm trying to figure out on Earth now. But like she backed that law. I met with her office. I was like, you cannot push AB 2098 that makes all doctors fear to say anything because they're afraid to be outside of consensus. This doesn't make sense. It's unethical. It's wrong. It's free speech violation. She voted for it anyway. So many Democrats in the state legislature voted for it anyway. Governor Gavin Newsom signed it. And as I'm speaking out, then I got the opportunity to be a part of that lawsuit, along with some great doctors, Ram Durasetti, Aaron Cariotti, Pete Mazzalowski, Tracy Beth Hogue, and supported by the wonderful people at the New Civil Liberties Alliance, the ACLU, who, by the way, during COVID was pushing for vaccine mandates and saying that vaccine mandates were a wonderful thing, was nowhere to be found in this free speech violation. So wonderful, it's so important to support great nonprofits, legal nonprofits like the New Civil Liberties Alliance, like the Pacific Legal Foundation, that's heading up as counsel for the current lawsuit that I'm involved in for free speech for doctors.
Was that first suit, was that Hermit Dillon? Was she involved with that one?
She was very interested, but she ended up not being involved in that lawsuit. But she was one of the people who reached out to me and was like, do you want to fight this? And so I really appreciate her fierceness that gave me that feeling that, hey, this is possible. We could do this. And she's a role model. So what ended up happening is that so there's a couple different groups that sued. Children's Health Defense Fund was one of them. We had individual doctors. I was also suing in the capacity of a patient because as a patient, I also said I want to be able to hear my doctor's speech, because the First Amendment not only affects the speaker, the First Amendment is also supposed to protect the rights of the listener to hear that speech. So if the government is interfering with the First Amendment rights of the doctor, then the patient's First Amendment rights to hear that speech are also being interfered with. So I sued in both capacities, as a doctor and a physician. And there were several other doctors. There was another legal nonprofit that was also fighting. So, and it's nice to have different groups fighting the same law, because it gives you more opportunity and for the nuance in the debate to get, for the nuance in the discussion, the arguments to get better as well. And so we got a preliminary injunction when we were fighting the physician consensus law, and that's very rare to get. And our judge had come, and he was prepared. He was like, what? This law doesn't make grammatical sense. This law doesn't make it clear on what a doctor can say and what they can't say. Who's deciding what they can say and what they can't say? And he was asking these questions of the state's lawyer. By the way, the state's lawyer is the same lawyer in this current case. So at both lawsuits, the state's lawyer is the same person. And so she really couldn't answer some of these questions. She did her best in that first case. And he just pointed out how ridiculous the state's arguments were. He's called the law nonsense. And when he said that, I felt so much better. It's like, finally, someone can see how nonsense is. Gavin Newsom didn't see the nonsense. Rob Bunta, the attorney general, didn't see the nonsense. All those Democrats who voted for this bill didn't see the nonsense, didn't see the gross ethical First Amendment rights violations in it. And but he gave us the preliminary injunction, which meant that they couldn't come after us if we broke the law. And then he decided to hold off on ruling. And in the meantime, one of the other groups of doctors that had lost went to the appellate level. And in the appellate level, the 3-judge panel was like really cooking the state attorney, basically like giving her lots of questions, like, this doesn't make sense, and really questioning her. So it looked like they were going to lose at the appellate level. And what happened, this is the back insider story, is that one of my friends had Gavin Newsom come up to him. And what he did is he said, and this is actually after the fact, what ended up happening is they repealed the law very quietly. And Gavin Newsom went up to my friend and he said, it was my idea to repeal the law. And he took credit for it. And I think what ended up happening is that he saw how grossly unethical and a violation of free speech this was. And he wanted to look good, so he saw that it was going to make him and the state look bad, and so he got the Democrats to push for the repeal.
I have no doubt that he saw that it was going to make him look bad. I do doubt that he actually had an appreciation for the intrusion on our speech. That I don't think, but it would have made him look bad, and that's important to him. We're going to talk more about him. I have to take a little break. We're also going to talk about a study that has been exposed for being a hoax about African-American babies be more likely to die after under the care of Caucasian physicians, which they now have on the record, the researchers saying, and then leave that data out, leave that part out, because it won't help make the narrative, that they would literally say narrative in terms of a scientific publication, which is, again, I'm disgusted by people. But we'll talk about that right after this. We're here with Dr. Azadeh Khatibi. Be right back. The wellness company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/TWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there.
Ask Dr. Drew.
I have no idea who Dr. Drew is.
He's been watching a lot of Dr. Drew lately.
Dr. Drew.
Well, we are delighted to welcome a new sponsor to our program. We have all used this product line from Active Skin Repair. Our little baby granddaughter has. The favorite now is the medical grade spray, which supports the body's natural healing process, formulated using the molecule, a naturally occurring molecule called HOCl, hypochlorous acid. Hypochlorous acid, I beg your pardon. Clinically proven, used in hospitals, has multiple mechanisms of action, including antibacterial, including anti-inflammatory, including pro-healing. We'll talk more about that as we tell you more about these products. Tomorrow, I'm going to interview the speaker's founder, the company's founder, and the spray comes in 3 strengths, adult, kids, and baby. It's used for minor wounds, cuts, scrapes, burns, sunburns, chafing, bug bites, eczema, skin irritation, and rashes. Pay particular attention to those last 2. And you guys know it doesn't take much to irritate my skin, and Susan complains about the desquamation. And I've been using the Active Skin Repair Hydrating Serum, and she was noticing today it was much, much better. Gentle, therapeutic, doesn't sting, make me break out, which is very difficult. My pores don't function normally from all the sun exposure I had. Oh, there's something that's a little bit better. And it's powered by hyaluronic acid, naturally occurring substance. And let's talk about rashes. Our new granddaughter had a success using the Active Skin Repair on the baby's bottom. The diaper change and the sort of diaper irritation was used to treat the newborn baby acne on her face as well. And then Caleb had his experience. So you want to talk about that, Caleb?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Look, you guys, this literally just happened this week. So we got this new sponsor, and then I go into the baby's room, and I see that my wife has already been using this stuff for a while. The next day, my little baby, this is so sad to look at. This is Presley.
Okay.
Fell / jumped off of the couch. And this poor baby. Look, it's just so sad to look at how bad this was. And so, but then we started spraying that stuff on it, the Active Skin Repair, and this is her 3-4 days later.
There you are.
Look at the before and
very gentle,
this is pretty
effective.
Wild.
Yeah,
I'll
be honest,
guys.
I was a little skeptical on these products, and I've read about it, and I've used it, and I'm pleased. So you go to drdrew.com/skin repair for 20% off. That is drdrew.com/skin repair for a 20% discount. And I think, let's see, we had something else I was going to talk about. Wait, Susan's trying to get it. Tell me what I'm talking about, Susan, I'll talk to them about it. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about Paleo Valley. And of course, don't worry about it. Everybody knows I love their grass-fed finished beef bone broth. It's made from bones, not hides, as well as the superior snacks. Both the superfood snacks and the sticks are incredible. I use the chicken, the venison, low-calorie, dense in nutrients, fermented. You can get them all at drdrew.com/Paleo Valley. What do you got there, Susan? Let's see. We had Paleo Valley on our luggage, of course, which we take on the plane all the time. If when you've got plain food as the option, Paleo Valley is a lifesaver. Again, the sticks are made from grass-fed finished beef. They're nutrient-dense, minimally processed, low in calorie. They are delicious. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Susan puts in the chef salad as well. Sticks come in 9 varieties. Some are pasture-raised pork and chicken. Others are beef and venison, as I said. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley to find the ones you will love. Get 15% off your first order and 20% off when you subscribe. As our friends and Autumn and the whole team over there, we love them. Paleo Valley, when you subscribe. All right, yeah, stock up, everybody. All right, and yeah, you should be subscribing. You should subscribe because I'll tell you what, when we run out of bone broth, the chocolate one, it's panic in this house. All right, so let's bring Azadeh Khatibi back in. We were talking about Governor Newsom. We were talking about the Attorney General, or the attorney is Bunto the Attorney General. Is that and neither of them seem to understand. Yeah, neither of them seem to understand the concept of free speech, or evidently not even the Bill of Rights, which is odd. That used to be, someone who I thought I was a liberal, I thought that was one of my organizing principles as a liberal, but that seems to have lost any meaning for people that continue to identify that way. Also, over your left shoulder, am I seeing a bust of Thomas Jefferson? Is that what I saw there, or is that Hamilton?
This is a bust of Washington.
George Washington, yeah.
Here, I'll
All
put them
right.
over here so Georgie can be seen. I got this as an award I got this as a bravery award for speaking out against AB 2098.
Well, you deserve it. Congratulations. And it is the founding fathers that would be proud, and it's their memory that we have to sort of bring forward to make to protect these sacred principles. So it's all right. Anyway, I can't believe we're having to have these conversations. But let's go talk about that article, that hoax article about the African-American babies in the ICU. Did you have a chance to look at that and review the hoax that has been revealed?
I didn't look at the article overall, but I did look at who was involved and some background work, and I did look at the FOIA email record. So I have some stuff to say about it.
Go ahead, let's do it.
Well, so this was an article that came out in 2020. It was called Physician-Patient Racial Concordance and Disparities in Birthing Mortality for Newborns. So what this means is basically patient-physician racial concordance is like if the doctor's white and the patient is white. If the doctor's black, the patient's black, they're racially concordant. So they were looking at, are there disparities in the death rates of babies, newborn babies, based on whether or not the babies are black and the doctors are black, or the babies are black and the doctors are white? If there's differences in race between the doctor and the patient, will the babies die at a higher rate? And this was published in the journal Economic Sciences in 2020. And the authors are Brad Greenwood, Rachel Hardiman, Laura Huang, and Aaron Sojourner. Guess how many of these people are doctors?
None.
Zero.
Yeah.
So from what I could tell, their backgrounds were in economics, electrical engineering. One person had an MPH and a PhD, but no MDs, no nurses, no DOs, no medical background. And I think that's also one of the reasons that the article came out being such poor quality and had such a gross error in it. But the article, when it was published, came out to much fanfare because what they were saying is that it showed that when black babies are taken care of by white doctors, they have a higher mortality rate than when black babies are taken care of by black doctors. And this got a lot of press. Also, a lot of backlash. People were upset about it because some people really don't want us to look at racial concordance data. And I think it's gotten so much bad press. One of the people, Rachel Hardiman, the MPH PhD, she now blocked. You can't see her tweets unless she approves you as a follower. Some of them have felt this backlash against them, and rightly so, because what happened is that when the paper came out, people were including Judge Jackson, Supreme Court Justice Jackson, talked about in one of her opinion judgments about how this lack of, or about how the death of black babies at higher rates at the hands of white doctors is a huge problem. And really focusing on there's some biases and there's some huge problems here in terms of the mortality rate of black people that we need to adjust, to attend to, especially implying that there's all this subconscious bias of white people towards black people that's affecting their mortality rates. However, Do No Harm, which is actually one of my co-plaintiffs in the AB 241 case that we're appealing right now, Do No Harm got the email records. God bless them. They FOIA'd the email records of the authors involved in the study. And what they found is that when they were writing out the study, one of the models that they did showed that white babies died more under the care of a black physician. And what Brad Greenwood, the lead author, said in the comment section when they were editing the paper together, he said, I want to delete this. I'm deleting it because I don't want to take away from our main argument. I want to strengthen our narrative.
He used the word narrative. He didn't say argument even. He said narrative, which is just the most bizarre word for a scientist to use. Bizarre.
Well, that's,
crazy.
Yeah, he said, I want to strengthen the narrative of saving Black babies, and I don't want to undermine that narrative. It's just shocking to me, right? Because
Nuts.
as a
Shocking,
scientist, yeah, you should. Well, it's not shocking, but in a way, it's shocking, right? The ethical person who wants to like just look at the data, and we of course understand that models can be twisted to say whatever you want them to say a lot of the time, but like you should be pursuing the truth, the essence as close as possible as truth. And these ideas of stories and narratives I are just ridiculous. And I wonder if there had been a medical doctor, maybe they would have, at least someone would have pointed out, wait a minute, we have to show what the data is actually showing. We can't massage the data or leave parts out to fit a narrative story. I'm a storyteller, right? So I'm a filmmaker. I love telling stories, but those are like two very different parts of the brain. And there's, you have to, there's one where you want to show people and lead them emotionally, et cetera. Then there's the one where you're like, based on facts, that part of the brain where it's like, let's do fact-based, let's adhere to the ethics.
You're allegedly doing science, you're applying the scientific method, and the null hypothesis is either informative or non-informative, and that's that. That's it.
That's it.
You either learned something or you did not. That's it. And then you do that many, many times and build other experiments. You do not get to create a narrative from your study. It's just informative, non-informative. That's it. Statistical analysis to back it up. That's all.
But it shows you like what the layers of convoluted, like egoic desires that are feeding this quote unquote science, right? It's no longer science because there is like this egoic desire for an outcome, right? Or that myopic focus.
It's like religion.
It becomes a religion.
It's religious. Yeah, it's fundamentalism. It is, it's the old school in the days of sort of Thomas Aquinas when the authorities decided what the truth was. That was that, and it was based on some dogma, and that's not the rule. Well, I hope we moved beyond that. I don't know. I kind of feel like you're going to get a JD, or you've had a mini JD already.
Yeah,
is that in your future?
I'm done.
All right.
No,
okay.
I'm not.
Okay. All right.
But I will tell
right.
you, I think one more. Wait, can I just tell you one more important thing about this article is that they didn't actually look at the reason Black babies were dying at higher rates under white doctors. And the reason was that more serious ill babies were being taken care of by the white doctors because more white doctors.
Let me say it in a way it's clearer. Yeah. The kids that needed the neonatal ICU tended to be more likely to be Black. And the doctors that were attending to this most severe kids in the neonatal ICU tended to be white. It's like assessing a hospital that treats the most severely ill patients. The surgeons that take on the most difficult cases. Guess what? They're not going to have the best outcomes. They're not. Because they're starting with things with a very low probability of success. That's just the way medicine is. And that's how we do research. We take that into account when we're assessing a hospital or a doctor's outcomes. What did we start with? How sick were these people? How likely were these things to get better in the first place? And then the other thing is, and let's both agree on this, we are not saying, in this conversation, we are not saying that physician race concordance is a good or bad thing. We are saying, and I would argue that if a patient wants it, they absolutely should have that. Or if a family wants it, absolutely they should have a race concordant physician if that's what the patient wants. But for us to sit on high and mandate it all over makes almost no sense.
It doesn't. And then when you have people who are not involved in medicine and actually don't have that understanding, you're going to get junk science like this, which leads me to the AB 241 lawsuit, which is the government trying to basically architect the medical consciousness of doctors.
Tell me about this one. This sounds unbelievable.
So this law was actually signed, was passed and signed by Gavin Newsom and the legislature in 2019, but it's taken a few years for it to be implemented. And what it is, and the bill was AB 241, and the case is Khatibi versus Hawkins, and we're fighting it with the help of our legal nonprofit, Pacific Legal Foundation. What they basically said is that they want every doctor in CME based on this law to satisfy the implicit bias teaching. So the law says that every single continuing medical education course, and in the state of California, a doctor has to have 50 hours of continuing medical education every 2 years. At every single continuing medical education course that a doctor teaches, they need to teach examples of how implicit bias affects perceptions and treatment decisions of physicians and surgeons, leading to disparities in health outcomes, or strategies to address how unintended biases in decision-making may contribute to healthcare disparities by shaping behavior and producing differences in medical treatment along the lines of race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, socioeconomic status, or other characteristics. So that's what the law says. And the law says that you have to every doctor or organization organizes has to do it at every single CME. So I think that this is ridiculous. It's a First Amendment violation. It opens the door to basically government controlling not just doctors, but all licensed professionals in California. And essentially what they're doing is they're saying implicit bias is bad, and we can have that discussion because I actually think implicit bias understanding is very good for doctors to have. Is it? It's still it's still controversial. So different doctors have different opinions on what like implicit bias is. Is it the roots of prejudice? Is it not the roots of prejudice? But Sydney Kamlager Dove, with the help of some organizations, created this bill and got it passed into law because they want to avoid different outcomes based on race and gender, et cetera, especially race. And basically, with CME, it's a system, just so your listeners understand, CME is continuing medical education. It's a system that was created by doctors, for doctors, privately, with private institutions. And it was just a bunch of doctors getting together and saying, hey, it'd be nice for us to have these education courses. And they would just meet and hang out. And then it became, as things grow, they became a system. Then the government, and actually the doctors were like, hey, it'd be good if doctors were licensed. We should have some level of licensure. And so the government, they went to the government, and then the government created a licensure system. And that's why doctors have to be licensed in our states. And the state then said, hey, you guys have the CME system. We're going to require a certain number of hours every year that you guys have to learn. And so what is now happening is the government is saying, hey, in your CME, in every single CME course that you teach, you have to teach on implicit bias. So they've hijacked a private system, and now they're calling for government speech in that private system. And Rob Bunta, the Attorney General, and his lawyers are arguing, and they've won it. They won it at the lower level, and we're appealing it in the higher court, in the appellate court. They're basically saying, we can mandate this speech because, and every physician knows this, doctors who go to CME are engaging in government speech, and doctors listening to other doctors know that they're listening to government speech. So they're just making this stuff up. It's incredibly dangerous.
Government speech? What are they talking about? What do they mean by government speech?
They're basically saying it's you're speaking on behalf of the government when you teach CME. Did you know that, Dr. Pinsky? Did you know all these years you've been going to CME, you've been listening to government speakers speak?
I've been going, and I've taught at CME, and no one ever told me that the government was involved.
Right. So the lower court has said the CME.
I want you to do something, though.
Yeah.
You got to go back to about 1994 or so and look at this exact same phenomenon as it pertained to the prescribing of opiates. You mentioned the pain is the fifth vital sign. You were required to go to a full day CME, I think every year or every 3 years, on how to give massive doses of opiates to anybody who says there's pain. There should never be pain in California. No human should experience pain of any time. And if you don't let your patient leave with 60 hydrocodone when he walks out of the office, you're guilty of patient abuse. And I remember, let me see if I can remember this. I remember the pain doctor getting, pain is the vital sign. Pain is the most important thing, was what they were pushing. And what did he say? I wish I could remember this. I think he said something like, there's absolutely no evidence that opiates are a good treatment for chronic pain. So let's talk about how to prescribe Dilaudid for pain patients. I mean, there was. Do you know that there was never any data to suggest that a chronic pain situation is improved in any way by the prescribing of opiates? Yet we were required by law to get. People don't understand. They want to blame the family, the family that funded the drug company. I forget the name of the family now. They people that made OxyContin. Yes, they were duplicitous, but this thing was perpetrated by the government. When the government regulatory agencies got involved in this, they mandated that we do this and threatened us not with malpractice, with criminal actions for patient abuse. That was state of California. Go look at that. Bring that up as the infinite wisdom of the state. And then when it all goes down, they're nowhere to be found. It really, and it got so scary in the 90s. Those of us that had patients in pain, we would turn all of our patients over to the pain management teams because it was too high a liability to not adequately treat the pain and not give them enough opiates. I had patients stopping breathing on the physical therapy table because they were taking so many damn opiates. And that's what the pain world was doing. You just bring up that history. Look at what they required us to do, and then how they ran away and blamed the Sackler family when the shit hit the fan, 20 years later. So,
oh my God. And they weren't even mandating your speech at that point. They were just saying you have to take this course. So, I mean, that's why government should not get involved in medicine.
They were mandating how we practiced. Pain is the fifth vital sign. Now, think about this. Your happy face pain scale was more important than your pulse. If you had zero pulse, what's the pain scale? What's the pain scale? That's the insanity of what was going on at the time. And boy, I was fighting it, and I got, you know what it feels like to fight this stuff. I got crushed on every side, from the Department of Mental Health, from my own hospitals, from the CME, from the California Medical Association, all the above. Just they come crushing down on you. You're interested in harming patients. Now with this bill, it'll be you're a racist. It'll be something crazy like that every time they take action against physicians who raise their hand and go, "You're ruining medicine. You're intruding on the practice of medicine."
Well, if anybody says you're racist, the comeback to that is implicit bias is a controversial topic, and there's people who created the psychologists who created the implicit association test, those three. There's discussion and debate and difference among them on whether or not it contains the roots of prejudice or not. So even the people who created the implicit association test that coined the term implicit bias have disagreements. So, and there's evidence that implicit bias training can even backfire and make people even more biased or resentful. So this is not something the government should be. This is not something the government should be involved in. It's opening the door to the government saying.
To be fair, the topic, you, me, and our peers should be struggling with this and trying to figure out how to make sure it's expunged from our practice, for sure. But we don't need the government to do it on our behalf because they fuck everything up, I'm sorry to say. Ugh.
Yeah. What we've seen throughout history is that terrible things have happened when the government is involved in healthcare and deciding what should and should not be done, whether it's the eugenics movement and forced sterilizing thousands of people, including Californians. California was the head of that, the opioid stuff that you're talking about. Yep. And now this. I mean, we should keep government out of healthcare and decision making. Now, I mean, with this idea of CME being government speech, what are we going to do? What if a government, it's going to open the door to different states, just so you guys, your listeners understand, it's going to open the door to different states. Yeah. One state saying all doctors at all CME have to teach that abortion is healthcare. Another state will say all doctors at all CME have to teach that abortion is unethical. And so what if a doctor's, first of all, it's wrong to be mandating speech of doctors. And second of all, what happens if a doctor is licensed in both of those states? Now they're in a terrible position because now they have to teach opposite to what one state wants. Are they going to get investigated? Is a fellow or a resident who's pissed off at an attending going to report them for not teaching implicit bias at the one CME that they forgot to teach it at? Are private institutions or pharmaceutical companies that fund CME now funding state speakers? Are teachers at academic institutions now going to get fired because they can't teach CME, which is a job requirement for them because they don't believe in it? So the judge asked the lawyer for the state what can they disagree with this law? Can they say they disagree with it? And she couldn't define how much they could disagree with it. So you don't even know what, to the extent to which you can disagree. So this is a dangerous precedent for all licensed professionals because it opens the door for all licensed professionals, whether you're a physical therapist, whether you're an architect, whatever you are, to have mandated speech at both the state and federal level when you're being taught courses. And some doctors can then become targets because the government can weaponize this law, against them.
I've been there. I'm sure you'll find it. I've been there. Hey, let me ask you a quick question,
Sure.
ophthalmological question before we got to wrap this up pretty soon. Retinal manifestations of COVID or vaccine. What are you guys seeing?
Oh my gosh. So you can get retinitis, you can get not just retinal. So let's just talk ophthalmic. So you can get like a conjunctivitis. That's like the most common thing that you hear about. And so, I mean, what are you going to do about it? You can also get retinitis. What can you do
what
about
I had?
supportive care?
Let me show you something. Let me put up the picture, Caleb, of my vaccine reaction. I woke up in the morning after the J&J vaccine. And if you remember, the TTP was the reaction. I don't know if you can see my raccoon eye there in my left OS.
Wow.
Woke up with that, which is the presenting feature of transverse sinus thrombosis. And I thought, is this my cavernous sinus going? What the hell?
And it was just one eye.
And that was vaccine. One eye.
It was just one eye? Okay, so yeah, usually when you get these raccoon eyes, it could also be not just an eye thing, but it could be a sign of allergy or it can be a sign of sinusitis or, maybe a thrombosis of something. So that's not good.
But that's what was happening. That's what was happening from the vaccine. They were getting TTP and then active thrombosis in places like the transverse sinus. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be the only male to get it. Had only been in females at that point. And I thought I'm going to be the only male to get this terrible thing. And the transverse sinus also, I don't know if you know, is associated with a midbrain stroke, which I did not get. Everything seemed fine, but it all passed. But it all passed. But in any event, that was my vaccine story. Are you seeing anything? Do you worrying about anything else on the front now? That you're seeing anything still active on the COVID front or the vaccine front?
Well, what I'm going to tell you is, in addition to my MPH degree and my MD, I had also studied molecular biology at UCLA. I was a Regents Scholar at UCLA. I studied molecular biology. And when I looked at the mRNA vaccines specifically, I looked at that and I said, why is nobody else speaking up? Because this mRNA vaccine is a setup, just the way it is. It's a setup for inflammation. It's a setup for immune disorders. It's a setup for recurrent cancer. It's a setup for, setup for cancer. It's a setup for latent cancers coming back. It's a setup for recurrent infections and latent infections resurging. Can nobody else see the mechanisms of action? Why aren't we talking about it? And why didn't the studies actually look at this? Why didn't they even look at inflammatory markers when they were doing this, when we knew from decades, maybe not decades, but years of mRNA research that this is an inflammatory product? And why didn't they look at this stuff? And then when I listened to the Vaccine Advisory Committee for Pfizer in December 2020, none of the people on the committee were asking these deep questions. One person asked about, is it possible that through a reverse transcriptase mechanism, the mRNA vaccine can then integrate into your genome, not the vaccine, but the mRNA can integrate into the gene and maybe through reverse. And what did the Pfizer representative say? It's a possibility. We think it's low, but we haven't tested it. It was just like, you're saying it's possible. That's what you're telling me. So, I mean, there's just so many things. But for me, infection, cancer, inflammation were like the big things that were glaring.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing them. We're seeing them.
A very sad chapter. And there's a new study about to come out in mice where they actually took a piece of I think it's the spike protein itself, which is what's manufactured by the mRNA, and then they measure inflammatory markers, and it's just off the chain when they actually do it. So it's shocking. Anyway, more to be revealed. This all is a story that we've been sort of talking about for a long time, and it was just, this whole thing it's so mind-boggling that here we are. But I'm so proud of a young physician like yourself stepping up and making a difference and fighting the fight, because all of our peers sort of rolled over. And before we wrap up, tell me what is the plan going forward? What are you fighting now, and what do you need us to do?
Sure. So what you guys can do is you can call and tweet your state senators and representatives and tell them to reappeal AB 241, the law. You can contact Gavin Newsom's office and tell him to put pressure to repeal the law like he did for AB 2098. You can donate to the Pacific Legal Foundation and other legal nonprofits like the New Civil Liberties Alliance. I really appreciate what Pacific Legal Foundation has done for us with this case. And keep pressure on your representatives, tweet this stuff out. And follow me for more information. I'm working on a documentary on free speech now with some great people. And free speech and medicine specifically. And you can follow me on my podcast, with Dr. Azadeh Khatibi, MD, MS, MPH, as well as my Substack. And keep speaking up about these things and be interested in them because it's your future. It's your health. And stay healthy. Don't go to a doctor if you need to, unless you need to.
That's a really important point. You come to us when the risk is worth it. Number one. And number two, if it can happen in medicine, it can happen all over the place. Believe me, this is not the only place you're going to lose your freedoms. It's just got to stop. And I hope you'll let me be a resource for you. Whatever I can do to be of use, you'll call on me, okay?
Thank you, Dr. Drew. You've always been a role model for me, even starting from when I was 11. And I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. You're awesome.
Well, God bless you. Thank you so much. Dr. Azadeh Khatibi. Thank you so much. Follow her on Twitter. Let's see. Oh, you got it. Kayla, put her Twitter handle up there. Get her X handle. Sorry. Is it just Azadeh Khatibi? It's too small for me across the room here. Is there any DR? Oh, MD right at the end? MD at the end. Okay. So look at the spelling there. It's not easy for us honkies. So for us, a lot of things are not easy for me to spell these days. Oh my goodness. I'm just getting over COVID myself, the third or fourth time I've had it. It's good times. Whole household here has it, and I'm getting that little weird long COVID feeling of fatigue and whatnot. That's kind of why I'm wrapping up a little early. And poor Susan is really suffering with this, as is my daughter. They've got it much worse than I did. I thought I had just allergies. At worst, a cold, because that's what COVID has become now. But it still has that funny... It can be a little worse. It can make you fatigued and that kind of good stuff. So I am actually taking, I have met with Peter McCullough today. I'm actually taking the Ultimate Spike Ultimate Spike Detox, I think he calls it. And he regaled for me today the success he's had at resolving long COVID, which I'm kind of in a little mini version of right now. So I want it to go away.
Sense, Drew. Now it makes more sense. I knew you must have been taking something like that because I don't understand how you're able to sit up and do a whole show. And I think this is the first time in the whole show you've mentioned, oh, by the way, I also have COVID.
Yeah. Well, I did pretty well with it. I'm sort of pleased with myself. I thought I was well by Monday, but then it's kind of waxed and waned, and I don't like it. I want it to stop. So that's what I'm doing with the Ultimate Spike Support. And maybe it's psychological, but I feel like I'm a little better after I take it. Did I get the Vax Integrity? I got the J&J vaccine 5 years ago, and that was that. And I think my daughter's had multiple vaccines, and she's got COVID worse than all of us. So there's a case study in this household where the vaccine didn't make any difference. And I had bad COVID back in the Alpha Delta days. That was a nasty, nasty version. Caleb, anything else? Should we put the upcoming cases? We're going to be in here tomorrow at 2:00. Is that right? Is that correct? Or the 3:00 tomorrow? Let me look at my schedule. Always asking and not. I think it's 2:00. Yeah, 2:00 tomorrow.
Our new schedule is supposed to be at 2 Pacific, but today was just the odd day. So all of these are at 2 Pacific.
Right. We're going to. The reason I asked for 3:00 today is because I was with the wellness company people and I had to get across town. I have to go back. But I want to say that we're going to dig into the French politics tomorrow with Jérôme Rivière, which is Marine Le Pen being essentially put in prison for nothing. This is what's happening in Hungary, in Romania, in Brazil, now in France, almost happened here. What the French are calling judicial dictatorships, that the judges are determining the functioning of the democratic process, and they've taken over. Marine Le Pen is a firebrand, much like, forgetting the one we talked to from the EU. Help me with that, Caleb.
Christine Anderson.
Those two remind me, Christine Anderson, they reminded me of each other. And she was the leading candidate for president of France, and now she cannot run for 5 years. So fascinating. We'll see what happens. She's appealing it. We'll see what happens to that. And then we're also going to talk to the founder of the hypochlorous acid that we're also enthusiastic about here, the skin product. that we're using on our babies and our kids and ourselves, and suggest you look into it. Did we get a website for the skincare? Caleb, I don't remember.
Yes, yeah,
I might have said it when
let me double check and see where.
While you're looking it up, I'll say Adam Coleman coming up, Sean Farash, let's see, he was, oh my gosh, he was I can't remember exactly what it was, but he had a situation. Oh, I can't remember now. Okay, I'm sure Emily's going to suddenly.
He was a swatting victim from the recent swatting attempts.
Exactly. He was a SWAT victim. That's right. We're going to talk about swatting. Salty Cracker, Mark Robert coming around. Got a lot to talk about. So we got a lot of good stuff. And anything else there, Caleb? Did you find
all they have to do is go to drdrew.com/skin repair, and they'll find all the stuff. They actually get a discount with that as well.
Easy. All right, excellent. All right, and I've got some very exciting product that I have developed myself that I'll be talking about shortly with the V-Shred people that I'm really excited about. So I'll let you know about that. But as soon as it's available, I take it myself now, and I think it's great. All right, everybody, we'll see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.